"Give me your Netflix password, you monkey," she said. "My name's Jordan Ellis. I'm a regular guy who works from home, minds my own business, and tries to avoid getting involved in neighbor drama. I live in a quiet little suburb, just me, my dog, and my ridiculously overpriced internet bill. The neighborhood is peaceful, with well-manicured lawns and friendly faces. However, about 6 months ago, a woman moved in 2 doors down, and my life took an unexpected turn. Her name is Karen, and she's a blonde bob haircut, Lexus driving, block honing kind of woman. You know the type. At first, I thought she was just another neighbor trying to make small talk. We exchanged pleasantries, and I told her about my job. In tech, she smirked and asked if I could hook her up with faster Wi-Fi. I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. But little did I know, she was dead serious. Over the next few weeks, she started showing up more and more, asking for favors and trying to get closer to me. First it was, "Do you have jumper cables? Then can I borrow your hose?" I tried to be friendly and accommodating, but I could sense that she was pushing the boundaries. As time went on, her requests became more frequent and more intrusive. She would show up at my doorstep unannounced, asking to borrow tools or equipment. I started to feel like I was being taken advantage of, but I didn't want to be rude or confrontational. I tried to brush it off, thinking that she would eventually get the hint and leave me alone. But that wasn't the case. One day she asked if she could log into my Netflix account just for the night, claiming that her internet was down. I didn't want the hassle, so I said no. That's when her entire face changed. Her voice went flat, her smile disappeared, and she looked at me like I had personally kicked her Shih Tzu. I was taken aback by her reaction, but I stood firm. I told her that I wasn't comfortable sharing my account information with her, and that she should consider getting her own subscription. She stormed off mid-sentence, leaving me feeling confused and a bit concerned. But little did I know, it was only the beginning. I went back to my routine, trying to put the encounter out of my mind. But the memory of her angry face lingered, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had just made a powerful enemy. As the days went by, I noticed that Karen was avoiding me. She wouldn't even look in my direction, and I thought that maybe she had finally gotten the hint, but I was wrong. She was just biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had no idea what she was planning, but I was about to find out. 2 days later, I got a knock at the door. It was Karen, and she was with her husband. He was in uniform, and he looked like he meant business. My stomach dropped as I realized that I was in for a wild ride. I opened the door, trying to compose myself, and invited them in. Not because I wanted to, but because I had nothing to hide. Karen's husband, the cop, was already reaching for something at his hip, and I could sense the tension in the air. He said, "They got a report that I've been digitally harassing Karen, and that I promised her online services and failed to deliver." He actually said Netflix fraud like that's an official charge. I stared at him, completely dumbfounded, trying to process what was happening. Karen was behind him, fake sobbing, clutching her phone like it's a body cam. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I knew it was all an act. She was trying to manipulate the situation, to make me look like the bad guy. But I wasn't having it. I invited them to sit down, trying to keep the situation calm, and asked them to explain what was going on.
Ow.
The cop started to rattle off some nonsense about how I had promised Karen access to my Netflix account and how I had failed to deliver. I listened patiently, trying to keep my cool, and then I asked him if he had any evidence to support these claims. The cop and Karen left my house in awkward silence, and I was left feeling relieved, but also concerned. I knew that I had just made a powerful enemy, and I had no idea what they were capable of. I decided to take matters into my own hands and report the entire incident to Internal Affairs and my local precinct. I gathered all the evidence I had, including the logs and the Nest camera footage, and headed to the police station. As I walked in, I was greeted by a friendly officer who listened to my story and took my statement. I showed him the evidence, and he nodded sympathetically. He told me that this wasn't the first time Karen's husband had responded to personal disputes in uniform, and that there were already several complaints filed against him. I was shocked and outraged, but also relieved that I had taken the right course of action, The officer told me that they would investigate the matter and take necessary action. I left the police station feeling hopeful, but also aware that this was far from over. I knew that Karen and her husband would stop at nothing to discredit me and cover their tracks. I decided to take extra precautions, changing every password I had and upgrading my firewall. I also got a brand new 75 inches old to stream my shows in peace. But I knew that this was just the beginning. As the days went by, I noticed that Karen and her husband were avoiding me. They wouldn't even look in my direction, and I thought that maybe they had finally gotten the hint, but I was wrong. They were just biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had no idea what they were planning, but I was ready for whatever came next. I had taken the necessary precautions. I was confident that I could handle whatever they threw my way. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to notice that something was off. Karen's social media accounts had gone dark, and her husband was nowhere to be seen. I heard rumors that he had been put on administrative leave and that Karen was in hiding. I didn't know what to believe, but I knew that I had to be careful. I had just taken down a corrupt cop and his wife, and I had no idea what they were capable of. That's when I walked straight to my modem, opened my router dashboard on the smart TV, and showed him the log. Karen's IP address was all over it with multiple failed login attempts. Her MAC address was spoofed, and it was clear that she had tried to hack her way into my account. The cop's face turned red, and Karen's eyes widened in shock. They hadn't expected me to have proof, and they were caught off guard. I could see the panic in their eyes. I knew I had the upper hand. I pulled up my Nest camera footage, and it clearly showed Karen standing on my front porch late at night, holding her phone up to the window, trying to scan my screen through the curtains. The cop's jaw clenched, and Karen went pale. I asked very calmly if attempting to breach someone's network and fraudulently accessing their paid accounts counted as a crime, because I was happy to file one, and I could sense the weight of the situation. Karen and her husband exchanged a nervous glance, and I knew they were in trouble. The cop started to backpedal, trying to downplay the situation, but I wasn't having it. I told him that I had all the evidence I needed, and that I would take this to the authorities, if necessary. Karen started to protest, claiming that she was just joking, but I knew better. I had seen the look in her eyes, and I knew she was capable of anything. The situation was escalating, and I could sense the tension building. I was ready for whatever came next, but I had no idea what Karen and her husband had planned. 3 weeks later, I saw a moving truck in front of Karen's house, and I knew that they were leaving. I was relieved, but also curious. What had happened to Karen's husband? Had he been fired, or was he just taking a break? I decided to do some digging, and I started to investigate the situation. I talked to my neighbors, and they told me that Karen's husband had been put on administrative leave pending an investigation. I also talked to the police department, and they confirmed that Karen's husband was under investigation for misconduct. They told me that he had a history of using his badge to intimidate and harass people, and that this was just the latest incident. I was shocked and outraged, but also relieved that justice was being served. I realized that I had just scratched the surface of a much larger problem, and that there were many more people like Karen and her husband out there. As I continued to investigate, I discovered that Karen's husband had a long history of corruption and abuse of power. He had been using his badge to intimidate and harass people for years, and he had finally been caught. I was proud of myself for standing up to him and reporting him to the authorities. I had taken a stand against corruption, and I had made a difference. But as I delved deeper into the investigation, I realized that there was more to the story. Karen's husband was just a small part of a larger problem, and there were many more corrupt cops out there. I decided to continue my investigation, to expose the truth and bring justice to those who had been wronged. I was ready for whatever came next. I was determined to make a difference. As the news of Karen's husband's investigation spread, the community started to react. People were shocked and outraged, and they demanded justice. The police department was forced to take action, and they launched a full-scale investigation into the corruption. I was hailed as a hero, and my story was shared all over social media. But as the attention died down, I realized that there was still much work to be done. The corruption went deep, and it would take time and effort to root it out. I decided To continue my fight, to expose the truth and bring justice to those who had been wronged, I started a blog where I shared my story and my investigation. I also started a podcast where I interviewed experts and victims of corruption. As I continued to speak out, I faced backlash from those who wanted to silence me. I received threats and harassment, but I refused to back down. I knew that I was making a difference, and I was determined to see justice served. I worked with the police department, providing them with evidence and testimony. I also worked with the community, organizing rallies and protests. The fallout from the investigation was massive. Several cops were fired and many more were disciplined. The police department was forced to reform, and new policies were put in place to prevent corruption. I was proud of what I had accomplished, but I knew that there was still much work to be done. I continued to fight, to expose the truth and bring justice to those who had been wronged. As the dust settled, I realized that I had been given a new beginning. I had taken a stand against corruption, and I had made a difference. I had also learned a valuable lesson about the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. I decided to continue my work. To expose the truth and bring justice to those who had been wronged, I started a new project. A nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting corruption and promoting transparency. I worked with a team of dedicated individuals, and together we made a difference. We exposed corruption, we brought justice to those who had been wronged, and we promoted transparency and accountability. As I looked back on my journey, I realized that it had been a wild ride. I had faced challenges and obstacles, but I had also achieved great things. I had taken a stand against corruption, and I had made a difference. I had also learned a valuable lesson about the importance of standing up for what is right. Even in the face of adversity, I was proud of what I had accomplished, and I was excited for the future. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready. I was ready to continue my fight to expose the truth and bring justice to those who had been wronged. I was ready to make a difference, and I was ready to start a new chapter. In my life, the experience with Karen and her husband had been a wake-up call, but it had also been a blessing in disguise. It had given me a new purpose, a new passion, and a new beginning.